Do you feel adventure stirring in your soul? Do you dream of living beyond the limitations of this land? Do you seek adventure? Do you seek glory? Do you seek to protect those that you love? Do you have in your heart the spirit of a man or woman or mouse? Today, we really join the ranks of the Mouse Guard. Hello and welcome. We're starting something quite new here on Rogue Reviews. It's something I've been thinking about doing for a little while now, and it's basically reviewing a set of RPGs. Instead of just tabletop gaming, this is a whole aspect of the hobby which various people absolutely love. It's kind of where I got my revelation and then sort of rebirth within the hobby, way back in times of college times, and today very much RPGs and tabletop is really what brings me to gaming, the source of love and creativity that I enjoy. So, interspersed with our fantastic board reviews, we will be doing some RPG reviews of different systems. Now, most of the time, this is from my perspective as a GM, sometimes it's my perspective as a player, but really what I'm trying to do is just give you another aspect of the hobby that I think you will absolutely love. Now, if you've never, ever tried an RPG, it's basically like collaborative storytelling. Depending upon the actual style of the system, this could be very much either like hard fantasy, hard science fiction, it could be something completely different. But the idea is that you are working together with other players to make up a party of adventurers, usually, to go on a story that's been created by a games master or game director or game mistress or whatever else you want to call it. And ultimately you work together living through your character's eyes. So you could be a proud barbarian, you could be a loyal servant of a king, you could be a cleric, you could be a mage, a sorcerer, you could be a ranger, all sorts, absolutely all sorts. You could be a rogue, in fact, although I am kind of more of a cleric paladin, but anyway. The idea is that it's a way of telling the story together. Now, rather than just basically say, this is what happens and that's it, you generally resolve things, for example, by rolling dice. Gee, who would have heard of that before? Now, depending upon the system or the characters you have, they may have certain statistics, certain stats. They could be strong, they could be fierce, they could be brave, they could be clever, etc, etc, etc. I'm pretty sure you're used to this kind of thing already, so I'll stop there. What's Mouse Guard? Well, Mouse Guard originally came out of a series of comics created by David Petersen. They were an absolute treasure and joy. Beautiful characters, fantastic art, creating a world where the mouse kingdom, shall we say, the mouse countries, the mouse colonies, works together to form a world to protect itself against evil. The idea is that there are no humans in this world, it's basically sentient creatures, only as far as mice and weasels, who are kind of the bad guys. Anything else like a fox is just a beast. Anything like a bear is a terrifying nightmare beyond all proportion. You kind of form this knight cadre of guards. Guards can be male, guards can be female, guards can be young, guards can be old. They are ruled over by a matriarch who basically directs the attentions of the guard. Now, wherever there is need in the land, the matriarch will basically send people out. So Gwendolyn is the main matriarch in this form. So this could be things like after the winter, which is kind of a semi-apocalyptic event where basically everything settles down and hides under a layer of snow for several months. The land is restored. So the Mouse Guard, for example, could be clearing and patrolling the roads. They could be doing something simple like making sure the mail gets through. They could be fighting off incursions of wild beasts. Or if your GM is kind of a bit ridiculously ambitious, they could be freeing the world from tyranny and all-out war. But that's in the style of your GM. Who knows? So, the way that Mouse Guard works is you first create your guard character. Now, this is one of the best character creations I have ever experienced. And it really made things shine in terms of what was great about this game. You start off with a guard. You have certain stats. For example, you have your mouse nature, your will, your health, your resources and your circles. Well, what do these mean? Well, for example, your mouse nature is how inherently animalistic you are. So, if you have a very high mouse nature, you'll be very good at things like gathering food, scurrying, hiding, running away. The lower your mouse nature is, the more brackets human you are, the more cold, detached, statistic, etc. So you can make more rational strategic decisions. So having a mouse nature can be good, can be bad. Will is fairly obvious. Your mental power, your capacity, you will make this happen. Health, fairly obviously. This is how kind of strong and tough you are. Done there. Resources generally is how much money you've got to spend to achieve what you want to do. Speaking very, very simply, circles is the kind of the people that you know, your influence in order to be able to make things happen without money. So these can go up, these can go down, these can succeed, etc. You then have various wises. These are the kind of like your specialities. You might be fox wise, which means that you know a lot about foxes. It could mean you know good ways of attacking foxes or avoiding foxes or where they might be found. You could be things like river wise or autumn wise or night wise or bow wise. Really, there is a huge amount of potential here for creating little advantages in play. You have various skills, which generally kind of align to the different archetypes of the mouse guards there are. So you have fighter skill, healer skill, hunter. You could be maybe part of the instructor or a pathfinder, a scout, a survivalist, a weather watcher. And then depending upon how you influence other people, you kind of have three main choices. You could be an orator, which means you're most best at kind of speaking to a group of people and convincing them of what you've got to say. You could be a persuader, which means that one-on-one, you're very, very good at getting other people to believe you. Or you could be a manipulator, which kind of means you're more sort of a bit sneaky, a bit tricky. You might basically catch people out from what you say. It's kind of a bit more mendacious, really, but that's the way of getting the job done. You persuade people by tricking them, fine, whatever. You have various traits. For example, these could be physical traits, like you could basically have extra large ears, which means you're very, very good at hearing. However, extra large ears mean that basically if there are any huge loud noises, you could suffer a bit of a penalty. You could be a grey fur, an old fur. Basically, you could be long-lived and very, very experienced. However, this might mean that you're maybe not quite as young as you used to be. So there are drawbacks and advantages to those which are created really, really well. Okay, so depending upon your origins as a character, you have your name, you have your age. Equivalent ages, kind of like a very, very junior mouse called a tender paw could be about, let's say, 16, 17, whereas a guard mouse could be, for example, like 20 odd, 30 odd. Once you're pushing 40s or 50s, you're kind of being a bit more experienced, a bit more old. You might be things like a guard captain. Okay. You have things like your fur colour you can choose, where things like brown is common, black is reasonably common, white is very rare, gingery red fur is reasonably rare. You have your cloak colour, because all your mice wear cloaks, and this kind of shows their rank. You could have a blue cloak, you could have a red cloak, and what this says about you is, again, can be relevant. So maybe you're a very kind of dark or still personality. You're very, very serious, so your cloak is dark blue, and this reflects your inner, deep nature. You could have a bright red cloak, which represents your fiery nature, your impulsive conditions. You get the idea. So there's lots of little tweaks here and there that really make it personal. What else? You can actually design your character, what they look like. This is brilliant. You have things like the mentor that you had training in the guard. What your parents were may give you certain advantages in terms of the skills you have. You were trained by a senior artisan, and again, this gives you little advantages. You're also encouraged to choose a friend who can help you, and an enemy or rival who at times will work against you. You also have to choose what you want out of life. Now, this could be moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, year to year, or long term. You have your core belief. What is it that inspires you? How do you see your role in life? You have your goal. This is more kind of like right now, what are you working to achieve? And you have your instinct. If ever you are put in a perilous situation, what is your first impulse? It could be to draw a sword and run forward. It could be to protect those in need. It could be to defend. It could be all sorts. What this basically means is that you put together probably one of the deepest character development that I have ever seen. And it's all really thoroughly enjoyable. In terms of your actual particular stats, you're even asked questions by the game. For example, do you hide? So in combat, will you basically hide or stand your ground? When gathering resources, do you basically eat everything all at once, or do you save some for a rainy day? And these questions give you little bumps or things in your quotes, in your stats. So through a kind of narrative perspective of discovering your character, you make somebody who, by the time you get to the end of character creation, you know their every living thought and waking meeting. It's you know them through and through, virtually more than any other system that I've ever played before. This by itself is stunning. Okay? So in terms of the history, the world, it's all there. In terms of the characters, it is brilliant. So what does the game play like? Well, let's have a little bit of a closer look. Okay, so how does a game of Mouse Guard actually play? Well, once you have created your character with all its loving details and glory, what you then do is you get given a mission by the matriarch, by Gwendolyn. So, if in terms of the map that is available, everything comes out from Lockhaven, which is kind of the mouse citadel. From there are all these different territories spread out in all these different cities. Different ones are known for different things. For example, if you went to the town of, let's have a look, if you went to Barkstone. Barkstone is a working class town. It's got shops and trades mice. The gates are situated in a locust tree. The path went in a rock and a hollow, and it tells you all about it. What is this particular territory known for? Maybe they're artisans, maybe they're harvesters. So what's the problem? Well, maybe, for example, there is a stoat or a pine marten that has been going to their territories and has been attacking travellers. The guard has been asked to send somebody to save them from this danger. So you get your party together and you go out, you set out. The first thing you kind of experience is the weather, because depending on which season it is, that plays a huge part in the life of Mouse Guard. So, for example, most people will hide away in winter, not venture out anywhere. They will just basically try to recover as best they can. If it's summer or autumn or spring, however, the land obviously will change. And depending on which type of weather you experience, this will basically throw up new complications and new trials and tribulations across your time. You might have, for example, sudden summer squalls, or you might basically have driving rain in spring. Now that will make your life a little bit more difficult. So for example, if you're trying to get to Barkstone way over here from Lockhaven, this is probably going to be several days travel. So for example, if a river is in flood, that could make it much more complicated to get across. If you basically have driving rain and you're fighting a battle, it could turn the ground into mud. So the weather is actually quite a big element. Now, a weird thing is you have a skill, which is Weather Watcher. So what you can do is you can kind of observe the weather, and by observing it, as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle states, you therefore change it. So you can kind of go, oh look, I see some clear skies ahead if you roll particularly well. In terms of the dice, let's talk about the dice. Unique dice of Mouse Guard are absolutely great. They are D6 basically, and what you have is you have a snake biting its tail on 3 faces. This is a failure. You have swords. These are successes. And you have the symbol of the black axe, very, very important in terms of Mouse Guard lore, a weapon of a very, very famous champion, which is kind of like a potentially exploding 6, which means that you have a chance to roll these again. So altogether, you're looking to get a number of successes, depending on the difficulty given out by the GM. For example, a difficulty of 1 or 2 is fairly simple. A difficulty of 4 is very, very hard. So is there anything you can do to help you? Well, yes, there is. Obviously, in terms of, for example, weapons that you might have available to you in combat, these will give you certain bonus dice with certain events. In terms of particular skills you have, you might be asked to roll against your Pathfinder to find a way through a thing. Or if you're trying to build a camp, you might basically roll against your Survivalist skill. So what you would do is you would take 3 dice and you would roll, for example. Oh, right, okay, I've got a fail, a success, and a success. Right, good. So what does this mean? Well, let's say, for example, that it was a fairly simple difficulty. Difficulty 2, you find a lean-to shelter, or you find a place where you can make camp. Great, this counts as a success. So you record the success on your character sheet. Great, this counts as a pass. If it was a very, very difficult situation, you were in a bleak wilderness, there was literally nothing there, and the difficulty was 3. Oh no, you failed. Oh, that's bad. You still write down the failure because you also learn from failure. And when you have a certain amount of passes and fails equivalent to your next move up, you can increase your stat. So passes are good, they help you improve. Also, failure is good, it can help you improve. This is another brilliant element of the game. So you develop as a character. It's kind of things like, oh, I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to learn in future not to do that, so that's going to make me a better whatever. I love this part of the game. So even in failure, there is success. There are certain advantages you may have. You have things called fate points and persona points. These let you do certain things like adding a success to your roll, or for example, re-rolling any axes that you might roll to try and basically get even more successes. Okay? How do you get these? Well, these fate and persona points are awarded at the end of the session because whoever has done particularly well in that session, if, for example, you played to your belief, you acted as your character does, you could get rewards. If, for example, you achieved an objective, you could get rewards. If, for example, you achieved, you lived out your instincts, or you proved yourself the most valuable player, or you proved yourself the greatest role player, you can get rewards. And then you can use these in further sessions to help you when you need it the most. So it rewards strategic play. It rewards good role play. And again, this is another element that I love. So what happens then if you do end up fighting a gigantic beast? Well, you will roll fighter dice, that will happen. But you can also get into extended conflicts. These kind of like boss fights kind of thing. Or, for example, big challenges that can't just be rolled away in a single roll. And in this situation, you have certain cards that you resolve as a party. You have attack, feint, maneuver, and defend. Let's say, for example, you were trying to evade a hawk that was tracking you. Okay? Now, this could be a chase scene, for example. So, you could basically decide that as a party, the approach you're going to take is more an attack, right? This kind of means like you're running as fast as you can. You're really trying to make progress. Or you might choose to take more of a defensive approach. Maybe you pause and you hide and you see if the actual halt goes further on. Maybe you could feint. You make it look as if you're going one direction and then you go somewhere else. Or maybe you maneuver. Maybe you try to find a way through some brambles or crawl to one side or basically hide and run along a separate ditch. These are kind of supposed to be interpreted in terms of the conflict that you're fighting. Obviously, in a battle, they could literally mean what they are, but you can speak figuratively in terms of a different conflict. And of course, the enemy, or the GM in the case, is basically choosing a similar set of cards. And you do it in rounds of 3. So you will choose 3 rounds, for example, we're going to attack and maneuver this round. Meanwhile, the hawk, for example, could maneuver and then feint and then attack. And then depending on which combination of these come out, you then do different resolved rolls. These are either basically versus or individual. So, for example, if it made sense, depending on how you interpret it, that it was basically just your actions that matter, you are then trying to roll a certain number of successes, and if you succeed, then you succeed that action. However, if it's a contested roll, it could be a versus roll, which means that you're rolling dice, the enemy is rolling dice, and whoever rolls the best, then they succeed, and then you resolve it that way. Depending upon whether the enemy is strong or the enemy is weak, or the situation is easy resolved or harder resolved, you have to get to a certain point of conflict. This might take several rounds. This might be over in a couple of rounds. But depending upon the situation, there are things you could do to help. You can basically use extra points. You could levy certain skills, that kind of thing, to give you an advantage. It's a very kind of creative, collaborative process, because when you're doing a roll, other people can help you. For example, well, I am trying to use my scout roll to work out the best way forward. But since you've got Pathfinder, your knowledge of the path of this area could help me with my scout roll, so you can actually lend me a dice, which means my roll is easier. So it's all about kind of supporting each other as a party. Yes, you are doing individual rolls, but also the strengths of your party can help you be more of an individual success by leveraging the skills and advantages you've got. This is, again, a brilliant aspect of the game. So, there are certain things that you can basically use. You can basically have passes, successes, you can use fate points, you can use persona points. And this continues the story going along. Passive objective, passive objective, passive objective. If things go well for you, this is fantastic. If things go badly for you, things get a bit more complicated. You may become hungry or thirsty. This makes your dice rolls harder. You could become sick or angry or injured or tired. And these can stack. This is bad. So you can rest in order to try and recover these things. And basically this is a way of limiting your successes as a party. It's also a very good narrative tool. For example, you could perhaps choose to become one of these if you fail, rather than taking other penalties. The hawk pinned me down and struck away my attack. I'm going to get furious to try and power through this. It'll make things harder with me in the long term, but in the short term, it's better than actually losing dice or failing. So this is another element. So, what is there to love about Mouse Guard? Well, I don't know why particularly, but I fell in love with this system. It just had a completely different approach to many things I've played before, classically trained, Dungeons & Dragons, all the rest of it, and we'll get to that, but this was just something new. I'd actually read some of the graphic novels previously, and that kind of opened my eyes to the world a bit. And when I actually heard about this becoming an RPG version, I was so excited that I just had to buy it. It's kind of inspired me in different ways to play as a GM that I'd never really played before. Through this, I have done a stupid amount of prep, design, adventure planning. I have used resources I've never done before. I have made artifacts with 3D pens. I've hidden things inside other things. I've written special codes. I've designed maps that basically fill enormous tables. I have done shuffleboard battle planning. I have done, I've written entire books written in code. I've done sort of artifacts within artifacts within artifacts. I've made my own delightful little special items to have. Everything from Derek the Woodlouse to old Susie the Frying Pan, a weapon of which Samwise Gamgee would be proud. I kind of created new worlds. I created all sorts. I brought the world to the brink of like peril and revolution and destruction. And the heroes became these epic, successful geniuses, or just like hard-bitten heroes who would refuse to give up. It inspired me utterly. And it was just this kind of like heartfelt approach that everything you do matters in this world, from small to large. The quote of the entire thing is, it's not what you fight, it's what you fight for. So the idea is you are this champion of justice. You are this sort of guard who is basically a friend, a protector, a mentor, a policeman, a warden, an adventurer, all sorts. It kind of made me realise, though, from the playing perspective and also a GM perspective, that these characters mattered, and what they did really, really mattered to the world. So from the tiny scale to the relationships between the territories, to do with world building, to do with empires, to do with everything in terms of what it means to be a hero, this had something special. I created a campaign that so far lasted over 3.5 years with this, because it just inspired me to my core in terms of there's so much more that you can do with this system. It has so many different elements of classic RPGs, but various things are done differently, and they're done well. You will have fun discussing at the end of each session who was the best MVP of the day, who was the most valuable player, who was the best role player, who was the most workhorse to get all the roles happening. And each session is a celebration, and it could be everything from the changing of the season through delivery of the mail, through to kind of like developing plots and schemes and all sorts. You will hopefully come back to Mouse Guard again and again and again, and the realm of imagination here is huge. So in terms of a GM, incredibly rewarding. In terms of a player, incredibly rewarding. In terms of the actual lore and the world behind it, these are gorgeous books. You should read them. So Mouse Guard is a system that you will love, hopefully. If you're classically trained, if you like very, very crunchy rules-heavy things, this has its rules, this has its strategy, this has its depth. But if you don't want to basically just play the generic cliches of role-playing, this gives you a new chance. So please check out the comics online, check out the books, read the books, buy the books, look at the game, play the game, have so much fun, because Mouse Guard could be for you. there we go, I suppose. This is our first session of RPGs. If you like me rambling on, fantastic, wonderful, great. Please like, please subscribe. If you think that there's another system out there that you'd like to see represented, tell me. Chances are I might either have it or be covering it soon. We will get onto the classics like D&D. We will get into things like Pathfinder. I've also got a few extra ones, like I think we're going to do Crystal Heart next, which is an utterly wonderful system. Again, based out of comics, but really came to life. So there is a huge amount here to enjoy. Please, as ever, contact us at rogueartistcreations.com. You can find us on Facebook on Rogue Artist Creations, at Twitter at Rogue A Creations. We're on Instagram now at Rogue Artist Creations. And as ever, you can find me at gmfirst at rogueartistcreations.com. Thank you very much for this new adventure into our exploration of our hobby, and we'll hopefully see you next time.